Hello and welcome to I'll Knit If I Want To. I'm Andrea Maury of Andrea Renee Knits, and this is my little weekly video where I try to answer some of your knitting questions. Sometimes we dabble with other questions. Sorry, I was just saying, I just realized per the usual that the little thing I read questions off of is low on battery, but we're gonna be fine. Today I am wearing my Marley shawl, which I just gotta say, I love this shawl. I haven't worn it in a while, and I pulled it off because I was just in a very stripy mood, and I kind of want to make another. I'm like, this is a little, oh, I like it. Anyways, maybe we should do this one in hand spun. That could be a spin it to knit along. That could be a fun one. Let me know what you think. Okay, so let's answer some questions. Oh, by the way, this is Madeline Tosh. I don't remember the color names anymore. This shawl I designed, oh my goodness, it had to be 6 or 7 years ago. So anyways, again, it's the Marley shawl and I will link it below. It's just a 2-color brioche shawl, and then the border is garter stitch that's marled, but it wears so easy and nice. It's one of that, just, it's a really nice size. Yeah, I'm happy about it today. So, all right, let's answer some questions. All right, question number 1, do you have any tips for tubular cast on in the round? As soon as those stitches no longer fit on my needle and slide to the cable, all hope is lost and I can't make sense of whether stitches are twisted or not. My cadence while reading that question was so weird, and it's all I could think about while I was reading it. So sorry, we're gonna get into the flow in just a minute. But yes, I do have a tip. Just, if you have them, cast on using straight needles. With a tubular cast on, you have 2 setup rows that you do after you cast on those stitches. So with the tubular, that first getting the stitches cast on and mounted onto your needle, they aren't very sturdy. That's what makes it such a nice flexible cast on, but they can rotate around your needle as you go. And when you're casting on maybe 200 or more stitches for a sweater, let's say, then it can feel a little overwhelming as they twist around and you're trying to find which way they're supposed to be mounted on your needle. So because you don't join to work in the round until after those 2 setup rows, you can totally just work the cast on and the 2 setup rows on straight needles, then transfer to your circular needle to join in the round. And a lot of people find that to be just a lot easier and less stressful. I will say though, once you get used to that cast on with practice, it really does get easier. I can cast on a few hundred of those stitches and they do twirl a little, but you start to realize which way they need to go, twisting them back and forth. So practice will make it better, but use those straight needles if you got them because it will keep them mounted correctly until you get through your setup rows. Question number 2, with winter season around the corner, I'm starting to think about knitting hats and mittens. I love the Harlow original and Harlow worsted hats, and I was wondering if you could provide tips on how to make these hats 1-color brioche instead of 2-color brioche. I'd like to be able to work these patterns while I walk, but I feel like 2 colors might be too much to manage in addition to the brioche. What do you think? Do I have mine up here? I don't. It's downstairs because I took it on our last camping trip. But I have knit a 1-color Harlow, and I used my hand spun for it. And I knew I didn't want to do the 2 colors. I actually have a 2-color Harlow that's ready for the crown shaping, and I'm really tempted to undo it. And maybe I'll grab it. Just a little fun show and tell. Okay, but tips for 1 color I do have. So basically, it's pretty simple. All you're gonna do is use 1 color and you still work the pattern the same. So where it says, with this row around, use color A or MC. I can't remember how I labeled them in the pattern, but use your one color for one round, and then it says to drop it to the front and pick up your other color and then do that round. You just won't do that part. Just pretend that your one color you already used is that other color and work the same round. So it's basically going to be that you are going to work around barking with that color, and then you're going to keep using that color to then do your burp round. So hopefully that makes sense. Just keep using, if it helps simplify it so that you can just read the pattern as it's written, just think of your color, your one color, as both your main color and your contrast. So just follow those instructions the same exact way. You're just basically never going to let it go. You're going to keep holding it and keep going. And you'll find your rhythm really quickly. I think it'll make sense once you start going. But as some of you know, I have been working on this 2-color Harlow. This is using my leftover hand spun from my rad plaid cowl, which, oh my gosh, I still have so much. And also my leftover Kumo from my rad plaid cowl. So these are both used in that pattern. Ooh la la. And as you can see, I am really ready to basically start the crown shaping. And I'm kind of thinking that I think what I want to do, because I do want to cuff it. I'm just thinking now that I can see it up there. So yeah, basically what I'm thinking is that I want to unravel it and just hold these two together for the whole hat and work it like a 1-color Harlow. So it's been sitting over on my table there since the last month or so, because I'm kind of at a crossroads and I don't know which way to go. Do I realize that, man, I'm so close to being done and just cast this baby off, do that crown shaping? Or do I follow my heart and take it apart? I love to make up little songs throughout the day. My kids, I'm sure, love it. If you ever wanted to know what it would be like to live in my household, it's basically a lot of that. And then, okay, I was just going to go on a whole tangent, but I'm not going to. So, oh, the brioche. Yeah. Anyways, I'm thinking about it. What do you think I should do? Let me know. I think I know what I need to do, and it involves taking that apart. But next question number 3. I'm wondering if you have any tips for fixing superwash growth. I knit a sweater using superwash per the pattern recommendation. When I swatched, I got gauge, even after blocking. I was super careful not to stretch the sweater during blocking, but it grew so much. Now I have a sweater that's just too darn big. It took a long time to knit and the construction was a little weird, so anything I can come up with to fix it would involve tearing out the whole thing, which I'd really rather not do. Do you have any suggestions? Do you have any questions? Do you have any suggestions? Okay, so it is hard. I would be curious if you use the yarn called for in the pattern, because here's the lessons I've been learning, is that you could use 2 superwash yarns and they could grow more or less than each other. So a lot of like indie dyers do dye on the same bases as each other, but quite a few now have their own special blends. They're working with mills. They're doing some really neat things. And what I've noticed is they just are not all created equal in how they're going to change with blocking. So for instance, I also knit a sweater out of superwash, and I knew that this yarn was gonna grow. I knew it, I anticipated it. I thought I carefully calculated for it, and it did still grow to an extent that I just was not happy with the outcome. So it is tricky. It is one of the reasons why you will hear a lot of times, biggest swatch that you can manage, the truer it's going to be for you. So, because what I found is I had done my classic kind of probably like 6x6 inch swatch. Maybe it was a little smaller, maybe it was 4x4, but usually I say to, and also do a larger swatch so I can really measure the 4x4 within it. But my swatch was, about that big, and it did not show the truth of the growth when you have the total weight of that sweater. Again, I was also really careful with it. I will say, have you tried your sweater on? I'm guessing you have. But sometimes too, I will block a sweater and be like, I'm worried this grew too much. And then by the time it dries, it does kind of up a little bit and it ends up being fine. So all that to say, here's my suggestions. 1, try wearing it for a full day and just see how you feel about it. Because one thing I have noticed, and I do this time and time and time again with pretty much most of my makes, knitting, sewing, there is times when I immediately try it on and I'm like, oh, it's the best thing I've ever made. But then sometimes I have this moment of like, is it good enough? I don't know. Like that doubt, that artistic doubt comes in. But what I will find is that after I've worn something a few times, it's like it becomes friends with my body. It kind of molds to me more, gravity lets it settle on me, and I will end up liking it more and more the more I wear it. So that's why I say maybe try wearing it a little bit, style it with some different outfits, try a little French tuck. That can actually work really, really well with an oversized sweater. If you don't know what I'm talking about, a French tuck is just when you do like a little swoop, and it can take some of the whoop, some of the positive ease out of what it is you're wearing. So those are just some ideas. Now, as you said, it was an interesting construction, so it's not like you can be like, oh, I'm just going to take out the hem, take out a few inches, redo the ribbing. Sounds like that it's more complicated than that. I know there are people in past episodes who have said that they have had some luck throwing said sweater into the dryer. So getting it damp, throwing it into the dryer and trying to shrink it up a little. Even though it's superwash, there can still be a level of felting or kind of like snapping back up. So you could try that. I have tried this in the past. I knit a cardigan 15 plus years ago, and it was too big. And I'll tell you what, I tried to dry the crap out of that thing. I did it multiple times and it just didn't change it. So I ended up giving it to somebody else who it did fit. So worst comes to worst. I know that's probably like not the answer you want, but you can rehome it if it comes to that. If it's just like, man, this just isn't my style, it's not fitting my body the way I want it to, you can rehome it. Because sometimes I will find if you have to completely take something out and start again, that can be fine, especially if you enjoyed knitting it at the time. But sometimes it's like too soon. You're like, I just knit all this, I put in all this work and it didn't work out. I'm bummed. And so you might not necessarily want to reknit it. Obviously, if you did enjoy it and you're up for that, that is always an option. Go down a size, knit a size smaller, because now you know that yarn's going to grow more than you anticipated. So in the future, if you can and you have the yarn to spare, or you can unravel that yarn and still use it in your garment or whatever it is later, then knit a bigger swatch. I'm talking like 8x8, and maybe even let it hang to dry so you can really see that growth. Because that's the hard part. We do a small swatch because we only have so much yarn, right? And it can't always tell us the full truth depending on how much that final object is going to weigh because of gravity. It is going to affect it. It can stretch out some of those stitches. Now, this is superwash yarn. I don't feel like I had a ton of growth at all in this shawl, and part of it is probably due to the fact that this was like their high twist sock yarn. So ply and so much also affects how that yarn's going to react, even beyond just the superwash. So that's why not all superwash yarns are going to have that same growth rate. And I think there's potential that even amongst sizes, again, because we have to think about the total weight of that sweater, how much gravity is going to affect it in the long run. I don't know why my voice just got all gravelly. Hear it happening. I get really thirsty, I swear, the second I start these, and I'm always like, when's the last time I drank water today? I would think to have my water with me. I have multiple water bottles. I think they're all downstairs. Okay. So, as always, all of y'all with some tips, feel free to throw them down below. There are little things you could do, like throwing in some faux seams, which is when you would take yarn and basically use a crochet hook to crochet chain faux side seams. You could even do a center seam. I don't know if it's, you just call it a sweater. So I'm guessing it's like a pullover, that can help kind of hitch up some of it and help it not stretch a lot. You can definitely try reblocking it. And when you block it, as you lay it out flat to dry, I've talked about this before, but I kind of do like the scrunch and pat method, where I get it to the size I want it, pull out that measuring tape, measure, let it match the schematic, the goals you're trying to reach with those measurements, and then pat, 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 and try and smooth out the wrinkles that you have from bunching it up together. And you might be surprised by how that can help reshape it. I would be curious if you tried it on pre-blocking and if it fit pre-blocking, but that might be information we'll never have. It's just my own curiosity. Okay, so best of luck. Let us know how it goes, and fingers crossed. Okay, next question. I have 3 skeins of yarn. Oh, I had this one a couple times, so I was like, okay, this one's going on the list. I have 3 skeins of yarn. Last year I knit 2 skeins into an incomplete garment that I'm planning to frog. I'm wondering, should I frog the yarn into hanks and soak them to get the kinks out? Or can I just knit into something new? If you suggest I soak, what about the 3rd skein? Does that need to be soaked too for consistency? Am I overthinking? And everything will work out in the final soak of the new garment? Okay, so we've talked about this a little bit on here before in the past, but I do see this question pop up regularly. So I was like, okay, we're just gonna do it again. I would recommend, it sounds like this has been hanging out for a while, maybe a year or more, at least a few months. And, okay, so I'm just going to say what I do. You do not have to do what I do. You could do a little internet research. I'm sure there's people who, in fact, I'm pretty sure I know people who have done experiments where they have tried re-knitting previously knit yarn, and then like they took half of it and just knit it with kinky and all, and the other half they soaked and relaxed and then re-knit it from there, and then did side by sides. I believe those exist out there. You could also do your own experiments. It could be kind of fun. Here's kind of my thought on it. It depends on if I have blocked the thing I'm planning to unravel. So if I already washed it, if I already set those stitches, and how long has it sat around in its knit form? That will kind of determine for me if I'm going to go through the process of trying to get those kinks out by soaking, basically washing that skein of yarn and laying it out to dry. For me, for instance, as y'all saw in a previous episode, I was unraveling something I was working on. It is now back on my needles. It had only been on my needles for a little bit. Was that yarn kinky? Yep, but I hadn't blocked it. I hadn't set those stitches, and I was not gonna bother washing it, and it's totally fine. I've almost reknit all the section I had used up, and it looks fine to me. I'm not gonna worry about it. So if it's only been hanging around for a couple weeks and you haven't set those stitches by blocking, I don't think I'd bother with it. If you have blocked the thing that you knit and now you're gonna unravel it, I would probably wash that yarn, because it's just, they're gonna look like little edges of a puzzle piece. You know, they're gonna be set in that shape. And for one, it's not that pleasant to reknit with. Like, you will be sitting there waiting to get to that third fresh skein. So I would, in that instance, or if it's been sitting around for a year, because again, just that time alone has probably kind of set those stitches into place, then I probably would wash that yarn. So yep, I would put it into a hank. Easy way to do it if you don't have a nitty knotty, which I never have mine up here. It must be living downstairs. But a nitty knotty just looks like two letter T's, capital letter T's, perpendicular to each other, like this. And so that you can wrap your yarn into a skein. If you don't have one of those, flip a chair upside down, and you can use the 4 posts of the chair to wrap your yarn into a big loop. You'll want to tie it off with some yarn, string, and I like to do a figure 8 tie, and I do between 3 and 4 depending on how big the skein is. And then just soak it just like you would your finished garment. So I do a little wool wash in a warm bath, and I leave it there for 15 minutes or more. A lot of times, honestly, I don't think I ever only do 15 minutes. It's probably a good hour or so. I just realized something. I might have something hanging on that wall that I was meant to take down before recording this. Don't look at my wall. Okay. Anyways, hopefully everything's blurred out because it is not time yet to reveal. Okay, so I would not do the third skein though. Basically just because that seems like extra work. I mean, sure, you could probably just twist it and plop it in, but I would just leave it personally. I don't like to do more, than I really need to do. I think that some people do find their joy in all the little, even kind of like nitpicky steps of things in the creative process when it comes to knitting, sewing, weaving, spinning, etc. I can find that stuff can kind of weigh me down and keep me from doing the thing that brings me joy. So I'm not going to do extra if I don't have to, because there's just not enough time in the day. So I would let that third skein ride, and I would just soak the other 2. Next question is about the red plaid cowl. It actually says that. Next question. Love the pattern rhythm and the tessellated pullover, which I already bought beautiful yarn for. How can I prevent the different yarn strands and attached balls from getting tangled? I have to stop my knitting flow every few rounds to untangle my yarns. Thanks for your help and effort. So yes, it is kind of part of those patterns is the fact that you are managing 3 balls of yarn all the time. And that can be a little tricky to keep those from getting tangled. So what I do is I set 2 to one side of me and 1 to the other side of me. And I, instead of twirling my knitting like this, when I finish a round, I then rotate it back. And that will keep what we're trying to avoid, which these yarns were in my knitting bag, but you can still see, hopefully, I'm just hoping that that's focusing. You can still see how these 2 yarns are wound around each other, and that is what will happen if you just keep knitting round and round and round. But when you do a rotate back and forth, they can't spiral around each other. So that is what I recommend, because you're using 3 balls, and the way the pattern works is you're only ever using 1 color per row or round. Every once in a while, you probably will still have to do like a little yarn juggling, but I find that I had to do it a lot less often by doing that flip. So that's what I do whenever I'm working with more than 1 color at a time, no matter what the project is. Brioche, stranded, mosaic, doesn't matter. I always try to keep the yarn ball separate, and then I rotate instead of turn. So I hope that helps you out. All right. That was our last question. So I will just end this by saying, I realized the other day, one of the other reasons why I love making things so much, like knitting and spinning and everything. And I think it's because it pushes me to do hard things that I wouldn't think I could do. So this past week I was spinning on my flat iron, which is right here. And I've been practicing my lawn draw, which I'm very tickled to say I think I'm getting better, it's just so fun to see that change. I have 2 skeins. I had told y'all a while ago I prepped some fleeces, and these are my first 2 skeins. So this is the very first, and this is the second. And even just between those 2, I can see my spinning getting more consistent and better with long draw. Given I also think that this bat was prepped a bit better than this one, so that's obviously going to play a role. But even now, as I'm doing this third of 4 bats, I can just feel my consistency getting a little better. But anyways, I'm sitting there, I'm treadling along, and there is this horrible squeak. She's like, right. I'm like, where's it coming from? So I oil all the parts I can possibly find to oil. I'm oiling the mother of all the bobbins, all these things. I'm oiling over here. I'm like, okay, start treadling again. It's like, right. I'm like, no. It was driving me bonkers, and it was really deterring me from wanting to spin because I could not figure out how to get rid of the squeak. And so finally I was ready. I was honestly considering taking the wheel completely apart. It was like, I can't handle this squeak. So I got in there. I will say I kind of jumped the gun a little bit and just started taking pieces off. I learned my lesson. Maybe don't just start taking things apart. But I went through the manual, and what I found that I think was causing the squeak was actually that my drive wheel had become unbalanced. And so I rebalanced that drive wheel, I think from carrying it up and down the stairs in our house. I will carry my wheels around the house so I can spin at any given time if I'm lucky enough to have the time to do it. And I think at one point I probably just knocked that drive wheel a little bit. And I think over time it was affecting my treadles and the little special, I don't know all the names, part. But anyways, I gave those one more good oil. I rebalanced that drive wheel. And I have had 24 hours of blissful, squeak-free wheel spinning time. I did not a full 24 hours, but over the past 24 hours. It was just such delight. And then I felt so proud of myself. Like, I fixed it. This is something that I would have, maybe it just sounds like so simple. And some of you are like, oh my gosh, girlfriend. But for me, it's one of those things that I think can cause us frustration and impatience that we don't really want to deal with because we just want to keep doing the fun thing. And instead, I stopped, I paused, I troubleshooted, I used my hand drill, I figured it out. And it just felt so empowering at the end to be like, okay, I am learning these machines, these tools more and more every time I use them. And when I think about when I first started spinning to what I know today, it just feels really good. I'm very happy about it. And I can't wait to find out what I'm going to know in like 10 years from now. You know, it's going to be even more. So anyways, I'll leave you with that. It made me really happy. So I hope that you get to learn something new this weekend. Maybe you're going to try something that you didn't think you could do, and then you're going to do it, and you're just going to be like, dang, way to go. And share it with us. Let us know. Let us know what you did that you didn't think you could do. All right, I'm going to end this one here. Thank you so much for spending some time with me this week. I hope to see you back next week. If you have a question, feel free to click the link in the show description below to fill out the form to ask your question. And as always, there will be links to things like Zamali shawl. And I hope you'll have a great weekend and that I get to see you again soon. Bye.